Recently, I've had some questions on logo files, specifically the differences between a vector file and a JPG file as it pertains to logos. So let's jump over to the computer where I can show you that a little bit better. So here we have a logo for my business, which is Grit. And I have a vector version of my logo as well as a JPG. And to put it really simply, a JPG or a raster image is made up of dots known as pixels. A vector image is made up of points and paths, which uses a mathematical equation to calculate what that image looks like. So to illustrate that a little more clearly, let's zoom in on our JPG here. Now, we're blown up quite a bit more than most people are going to want to use their JPG, but here you can actually see the scale of these pixels and each dot of each color that makes up the image. These dots are what build your JPG, and they're fairly static in nature. If we go up here to our vector image, you'll notice that as I scale in, the pixels don't get bigger, and that's because this image isn't actually made up of pixels. We're just seeing pixel previews of it. The way that this image is actually built is with these points. These points are actually a location on an X and Y line graph, and then these handles are curves that calculate the distance and the angle between these dots. So what that means is when you have a piece of artwork that is a JPG and it's made up of these dots, when you scale that image up, or however you use that image, there's a finite number of dots. And as we zoom in, all that can really happen is those dots get bigger. If we blow it up, we zoom it in, we see those dots because they're becoming larger. When we have a vector shape, we can scale it as large as we want. We can zoom in as much as we want. Those pixels never show because it's rendering new pixels based on the mathematical equation that's used based on these points. And we can see what that graph actually looks like. If we change our view setting from a pixel preview to an outline preview within Illustrator, you can see what my line graph actually looks like to draw this vector shape. If we view the JPG, there's no graph. It's just pixels. So that's the big difference between vector and pixel-based artwork. It is really just vector is math-based using points on a graph, and JPEGs or pixel-based is using a bunch of dots, and there's a limited number of dots per inch. So that's really the big difference there. Now, there are a number of pros and cons to using JPEG or vector files, and it gets a little too in-depth to get into in this video. Just know that there is a time and place for a JPEG, and there's also an appropriate use for a vector file. So make sure that in your archive, you're keeping JPEG and vector versions of your logo for future use.